Nothing feels worse than critiquing the critiquer.
Everything was like here or here. There was no in between.
Against their will, committed our loved ones to go through it with us.
I was an offender of the same thing in our first movie, and we had to really, really cut it down.
So he's trying to keep her calm, but he's on fire.
First watch it, and then go back and watch it with the sound off.
What's a movie that exemplifies that perfectly?
Oh, jeez. Anyway, so today we're going to be talking about Rogue Elements by The Critical Drinker and his group of guys.
Nothing feels worse than critiquing the critiquer.
Yeah.
He's a great critiquer, too.
Well, I would say my critiques, and I'd be curious on yours, mine are less about the writing. And so it's like, it's not as much as critiquing.
Hey, he's a good writer. Well, first of all, I'm a huge fan of The Critical Drinker.
Yeah.
And I pretty much keep up with all his new stuff. Anybody who's in entertainment is aware that doesn't matter how well you can assess something or dismantle it. Like, there's always, when you actually hit the ground trying to run, like, it's just completely different, you know?
And sometimes I would say I've seen that the people who are better at articulating and assessing stuff, sometimes it actually hinders their ability to create effectively.
Yeah.
It's like, I mean, how many vocal coaches do you know who would never make a career out of being a vocalist?
Dietitians.
Therapists.
Or therapists. Yeah. And you know what? At my first critique on it was going to be acting. When I first started watching it, I was like, oh, we slipped up on the acting. Then as I watched a little more, I thought, it's not even really the acting. The actors seem fine.
I think the actors were competent. It's the direction of the acting.
Direction, yeah.
Yeah.
So what is that? Like, what is the direction of an actor? So it's like, how can an actor be competent and good, but not be directed well?
Well, also opposite. You can have a arguably bad actor who can be directed correctly, and you can get a great performance.
Hey, to this day, I don't know if Nicolas Cage is a good or bad actor.
Yeah.
Like, I'm totally, that one's in the air.
Yeah, but until you see The Pig, and then you're like, wow, I think he's actually a good actor.
The Pig? What's that?
Yeah, it's Nicolas Cage is like this cook, and then he has this little pig that gets stolen, and he goes on this adventure to find his pig. It was like his truffle pig would find truffles for him.
Really?
And dude, there's some scenes that it's like, man, that guy does a phenomenal job acting. Anyways, that's besides.
Oh yeah, no, totally. Nicolas Cage is often derided and made fun of for being ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
And, the bees scene is like an infamous...
But yeah, it's like, was that what the director wanted?
Yeah, but at the same time, his scene, him in Kick-Ass is great. And the scene where he's on fire in Kick-Ass is one of the... It's just one of the most tragically beautiful scenes, and it's like almost all acting. You haven't seen it?
No.
Well, him and his daughter are superheroes. They're vigilantes. They're side characters in the movie. It follows another kid. But he's trained, he's like actual superhero, like a super fighter. And he trains his daughter, who's like 9 or 10, to be this awesome ninja warrior kind of thing. But then at one point, the bad guys catch up to him, and they tie him up and are torturing him and beating him up to try and lure in the little girl.
Yeah.
And the main character, the boy. And it's been a while since I've seen it, so I can't quite remember if I'm saying this correctly. But as they show the scenes of him and his daughter at home, like kind of doing character development, building them, you see that they depend on each other. They just feel like in the world that at least they have each other. Their bond is really, really close. He loves soul music and funk music and stuff like that. So him and her always like dance and sing around the house. Yeah. Well, then they have him tied up and stuff and throw some gasoline on him, and they're like, we're going to light you on fire. So they light him on fire. Well, then the power cuts out. And you
just him on fire.
Well, you just hear people like, and his daughter has come in, like full ninja garb, and she's just like killing people. Like running around the walls and doing backflips and like cutting throats and shooting people in the face.
Jeez.
Oh, it's a brutal movie, but it's like
Yeah.
ba-dum, 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 right? And he's like, they light him on fire, and she's trying to get to him, but there's too many guys coming on. She's like, Dad, kind of like this, and so he's trying to keep her calm, but he's on fire. So
Yeah.
when you sing out really passionately, like in soul music, it sounds like kind of like anguish, but it's also kind of funky, right?
Yeah.
So he's reminding her of their training, right? He would
Mhm.
train her every day, like number 3, number 4, 2 backhands, do the this maneuver, things like that. But he's
Yeah.
like, ah, because he's on fire. So he's like, 2 side step, yeah. He's like saying like trying to keep her calm. It's like a sad scene. It's
Yeah.
funny. It's like dude. The acting is great. Anyway,
Yeah.
I digress.
But
But yeah,
anyway,
back
going
to this
back to
concept of
I think like look at the movie Stealth, right? Whatever year
yeah.
that was. $500 million movie or whatever they end up putting into it. Great actors, arguably, Jamie Foxx, people like that. And it just looks cheesy as all get out. Like there's so many examples of like great actors in crappy movies and relatively bad actors in great movies. So yeah, so
Like
going
what
back to the
other?
question of what makes it in the directing, do you know what emotion you're trying to get out of the actors? And are you helping them get to that? And are
What's
there
a
variances?
what's a movie that exemplifies that perfectly?
Oh, geez, I don't know.
I would
Um,
okay. I would say Lord of the Rings.
yeah.
Like if you watch Lord of the Rings, everybody has a very particular way of acting.
Mhm.
Even though all those actors, they're good actors, but they're very different
Yeah,
in the ways they act. And if you see them in different movies, they all do they have like a different baseline for how they are.
yeah.
But if you see them in Lord of the Rings, everybody in Lord of the Rings has a way of enunciating something, has a way of moving, has a way of expressing passion. Like, I always thought that was very
And there's
cool.
a lot of variance, and that's the part where I think Rogue Elements suffered was everything was like here or here. There was no in between. So
Yeah.
like the one thing I found is like if you watch the movie again and pay attention to the way they say the F word, every time they say the F word, it's always like here. It's like
Yeah.
ah, ah.
Yeah. Very
And it's like
strong.
yeah, and it's like sometimes I think one of the best examples is they finish with like one of the mission things and they're kind of like think they're in the clear and then the woman looks up and she sees like a decoder or something on the electrical box and she's like, oh, we're being followed, we're being tracked or something like that, and she just goes right into we're being followed. And it's like wait, you just figured this out, so shouldn't there be a variance of like,
We're
hey
being,
guys, I think party's not over yet.
yeah.
Yeah, and then you like start getting more curious and you start getting into it and kind of ramp it back up
It's
instead of
very
just jumping always to
it's
100%.
a little too like play acting,
Yeah,
like stage acting. Yeah.
yeah,
Whereas
yeah,
like with a movie, you're inviting people to be more intimate.
yeah.
Yeah.
And some really great actors will be able to notate that. They can kind of see it. But for a lot of actors, you're in the dark and you're very much trusting on the director to give you, basically feedback as to, hey, that was great. Let's tone it down a little bit. I think one of the best examples, and I use this all the time when filming, is Michael Caine has a master class, not the master class branded one, but it's a master class that he did years ago. I think it's for free on YouTube. And he says when he first went from play acting into film acting, he did the performance and he felt so good about it. And he was like, the director came up and he goes, Michael, that was great. That was great. Do a little less. Yeah, okay. So he does the scene again. He's like, oh, Michael, that was so good. That was so good. Let's do
Too little.
less. Yeah, and he comes back again and finally Michael goes, if I do less, I'm going to be doing nothing. He says, that's it. You And that's it, right? The camera is so close to your face, you have to do very little. And a lot of times it's those little subtleties
Yeah.
that, provoke that emotion. It's like when that woman started reacting about, they're onto us because of the detector thing or whatever. It's like go close and see her reaction in her eyes. Like, what is she feeling? It's like, what's that relief of, oh, we just, we got the target and then, oh, wait, more crap's coming up. Like, what does that actually feel like? What does that show? Instead of her just going to 100% and saying, wow, no, and just going crazy.
A great movie scene that shows that is from one of my favorite movies of all time, Silverado.
Mm.
I think it's 1985 or 86. But there is a scene where one of the heroes, Michael, can't think of his name right now, but he's sitting at this table.
Kevin Kline.
Kevin Kline. He's
Yeah,
sitting
Kevin
at
Costner, Kevin Kline, Danny Glover.
yeah, so good.
1985.
And they're all great in that movie. Jeff Goldblum's in it, and
Really?
yeah, there's actually kind of an all-star cast in it. But anyway, so they're sitting at a table in a saloon. One of the heroes, and this little woman, she's like almost a midget, like she's like this teeny little woman who runs the saloon. And this hero, like there's 4 heroes, and they all kind of have their thing. But this hero, his whole thing is he just doesn't want to be affiliated, always wants to be standing back from the situation, you know. And so as things start to go down, as the bad guys get busy, twisting kind of the conspiracy starts to rise. People are getting hurt, people are being kidnapped, and the other 3 guys are like getting involved, like fighting back. But he's like, I'm not going to get involved because I swore off the fight life long ago. I just don't want to be a part of it. But then they start doing these terrible things, like they kidnap a little boy, try to kill the parents, things like that. So he's like, oh, I'm going to get involved. Then one of the bad guys is like, hey, if you get involved, some of your friends may be hurt. And one of his friends is this saloon owner who's like this little woman. Well, there's this whole scene where he's sitting in this saloon with this little woman, and she's like, Cobb, the bad guy, she's like, why won't you go out and help? He's like, well, it's none of my business. And she goes, Cobb has something over you, doesn't he? I don't know what it is, but otherwise you would never sit around and watch good people get hurt. What is he got over you? Is it like blackmail or something? And then he looks so subtly. He looks at her and then his eyes dart away. And he's just kind of uncomfortable. And it's so subtle, you almost have to watch the movie a few times to notice.
Yeah.
And she becomes really, really still. And she goes, oh. And she looks down. I mean, it's one of the coolest scenes in a movie.
Yeah.
And then she's quiet for a bit, and then she goes, just to finish out the scene, because it's great. She's quiet for a bit, and then she gives this great speech where she goes, there are some people in this world that think because they're bigger or meaner than other people, that they can hurt and make other people afraid. She said, I've seen a lot of that in my life. And she said, but I don't want to be the reason that that kind of stuff is allowed to happen. And then the main guy says, the hero says, you could get hurt. And then she's very, very calm and like just kind of getting misty in her eyes. One of the coolest scenes. And the music just goes perfectly with it. She goes, but he can't hurt me if he's dead. And then it's like, like the piano comes in and you see him kind of looking at it. It's like a great, if there is speaking of masterclass, it is a masterclass in subtlety.
Yeah.
Like,
and that's the thing is like, I think Rogue Elements, there were lines where I was like, that could have been a cool line. But the way it was delivered or the way it was asked to be delivered. And I think that brings me back to one thing I've noticed with filmmakers. Like, I know when we were on our first movie, I had to constantly remind myself, don't be impressed with the fact that I'm in the middle of it, right? Because it's, you know, you've got the lights set up, you've got the crew, you've got everything going on.
You feel like Big Cheese.
Yeah, it's easy to feel like, oh, cool, we've made it and everything looks amazing. You have to still be hypercritical. And it's like every delivery, I always go back to my mind of, okay, how am I editing this together and what's my tone supposed to be at? And then kind of harkening back to that, because everything looks cool because, you know, it just feels cool. But is it actually what I want? And I think it's a big one because it's like those subtle performances often are more powerful. It's like one of my favorite ones that comes to mind, and we can move on. But I think this kind of leads into the next part. Man on Fire by Tony Scott.
I own it.
Denzel Washington's character, there's one part where you know, he's chasing out and killing everyone who was involved with the kidnapping of this young lady that he was protecting. And I think a lesser actor would have come in and delivered this line with big bravado and stuff like that. But the way he does it, he just does it so like calm. It's scary. So he comes in and this guy is like about to get up and go, and Denzel Washington says something along the lines of, "Move, and I'll snatch the life right out of you."
I know it's an awesome line,
Yeah,
dude.
and he
It's so
just does it.
good.
He just does it so calm, right? Versus like either a lesser director or actually, I think probably a lesser director would have asked him like, yell it at him, right? "Move, I'll snatch your life right out of you." And it's like, but that would have taken away from the intensity of it. And so it's like Tony Scott had enough wherewithal to be like, no, keep it calm, keep it toned down,
Or,
and
or
from
maybe or maybe that's just how Washington delivered it,
yeah,
but he knew to let it be. Yeah,
yeah, he knew
yeah,
to
yeah.
keep
It's
it
good
right.
directing.
Because it's like sometimes an actor will give you a great thing, but then I've seen directors. I mean, we were on set with one movie where, well, I guess you weren't there, but the rest of the crew was there.
But I might know the movie.
Yeah, you know the movie. And it's like there were so many times that the actors gave good performances, and the director corrected them out of a good performance.
Yeah,
Now, luckily, our team was in charge of the editing, and so we were able to choose the performances that we felt. Basically, what would happen in this case is like almost always the first inclination of the actor was better than what the director had actually counseled them to do. So, anyways, my goal is not to critique the critiquer, because I feel like a lot of times critiquing people implies that, oh, unless you can do it perfectly, don't do it.
yeah. Anytime you finish a full movie, just like anytime you write a full length novel, I mean that's amazing.
Yeah,
And
you did it. The comments that I wanted to give were more based on my experience and my own failures as a director, and things that I learned from those productions, and some that I see repeated here. That to the rest of the filmmaking world that's going to watch this, who are aspiring directors and filmmakers, just some little tidbits that I think could be helpful to help productions be more effective and more entertaining as they go forward.
I mean, there was plenty of great things about Rogue Elements.
So, what were the things that you liked?
I mean, it just looked pretty good, you
Yeah.
know? And I know sometimes people might say something like, oh, well, you know, it's easy to make a good looking movie now because it's more accessible and cheaper than ever before and more user friendly, the software, to make professional grade looking things. But with that in mind, I still see plenty of
Crappy.
really rough,
Yeah,
yeah,
even
really bad
multi-million dollar
looking.
budget movies that look like garbage.
Yeah, so the Rogue Elements looked good.
Yeah, I think they nailed the lighting. Props to the gaffer or cinematographer, kind of whoever was pushing for the lighting. I think the lighting was good. Locations, I think they did a phenomenal job with locations.
Huh. Yeah.
One thing I've noticed is like oftentimes people say like, oh, only if I had a bigger budget I could do better. And I found a bigger budget just allows you to do more of what you already have, right? So we've seen movies where it's like they had just total piece of garbage, medieval looking costumes that looked like they just bought it at Joann's, right? And then they get a bigger budget, and now they have, instead of 5 crappy medieval, just bought at Joann's costumes, they now have 100 crappy medieval just bought at
Yeah.
Joann's costumes, right?
Instead of 5 better looking costumes.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And so it's like we find, at least in my experience, I found like what you can do on the low budget can just be expanded upon with a bigger budget. Like the budget doesn't make it better, it just makes it more of what it already is. So it's like they did a phenomenal job with locations, and with a bigger budget, whoever did the location scouting, whether that was, them or if they actually had a location manager, dude, props to that person. Like the locations were awesome. I think they did a phenomenal job, and more of a budget, they could get even cooler locations because they knew what they were looking for.
All right.
And if that location person wants to move to the US and do some location scouting for us, I think we're in the market for one of those.
That would be rad.
But that brings me to the next part, kind of going off of Man on Fire. One thing that I think great movies that like Tony Scott or Ridley Scott did, great pacing.
Yeah.
So if you look at them like Kingdom of Heaven or Man on Fire, things like that, you have a lot of scenes that are 90 seconds or less. And it just boom, boom. The first, 30 minutes of the movie are a whole bunch of compilations of like 30-second, 40-second, 90-second scenes. And it just keeps moving. And when they do have a longer scene, one of the key things that we've noticed is they have one component of exposition. So that scene has one thing that it is its purpose, and then it moves on. It doesn't have 2 or 3 purposes in one scene.
Yeah.
And it helps it move quickly. And I know the first movie that we did, we didn't quite realize that, and we had 3-minute, 4-minute long scenes, and it just slogged on forever. And then we had establish that they're new to the city, establish that they feel hurt or they feel alone, establish that their mom got divorced, and it's like now we're establishing multiple things in one scene, and you forget what's actually going on. And I noticed that a lot in Rogue Elements, and it could be kind of more of coming from the book writing side.
Yeah.
But I think the biggest offender was the whole the intelligence meeting where all 3 of them come together and they're trying to figure out what they're going to be doing. That scene, if I recall, I calculated it was like 4 minutes 30 seconds or 5 minutes, and it has like 20 components of exposition, and it goes on so long. And I walked away. I finished that scene not actually knowing what was accomplished because there was so much. My brain kind of lost track of it.
Interesting. Yeah. I think that's true. I think obviously that's genre dependent to a degree. Because there are some movies that do have great big long scenes with lots of information that work better. But especially with an action movie like this, I mean, yeah, you want that. You're moving right along. You got to remember why people are watching.
Yeah. The one thing I'd say that and obviously, there are no rules in filmmaking, but one thing I've noticed is when you do have a longer scene with lots of exposition and, the great of the great films, you'll notice there's a lot of movement. It's like a Spielberg, right? They'll have a setup here, and then they walk over here, and now we're into a different setup. And technically, those all end up acting as their own little scenes.
That's, because you mentioned that and you said Spielberg, that's essentially the explaining how the dinosaurs came to be from Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
Right? They walk them through the facility, and they're in that sitting ride thing that kind of turns.
And you're going here, you're going here, you're going here.
Interesting. That's a good point.
And also, one thing to keep in mind is when you go back and watch those, I think it's important to realize that you're still typically having one key component per setup. So we're going to establish this is how we produce the eggs. Boom. We're going to establish this where we got the DNA. Boom. And we go on. And it helps you digest because we're moving on to the next thing. And you can almost remember, that thing I learned on the previous one. Versus if you're just in one room and sitting there and you go through all these different components of exposition, it's hard to keep track of what have we actually made decisions on and what are we moving forward with. Right. And that was one thing that I noticed where it's I was an offender of the same thing in our first movie, and we had to really, really cut it down to get it to where, we tried so hard to get those scenes down to 2 minutes. And what we ended up finding was, it was hard because it wasn't written that way. And so then our next movie that we did, we ended up writing it specifically for 90 seconds or less. And oh my gosh, you can fly to the first hour of our second movie, and it feels like 15 minutes. Versus our first movie, the first 30 minutes felt like friggin' 2 hours.
Yeah. You can thank your writer for blundering that.
Well,
Yeah, no, that's totally... And listen, this is where the critique comes from, because when you have committed it yourself, you're always your biggest critic. So you kind of sit and stew on that over and over again, thinking, oh man, that next time I always got to make sure I don't do that. Then you see it in every piece of work that has it after that. Yeah. So that's probably why that stood out so strongly to us.
Yeah, and it's I would always say, go watch We Bought a Zoo. Everyone says they've seen We Bought a Zoo, and they're like, I hate it. But it's
everyone says that they've seen that movie.
Yeah, and then when they watch it,
it's the most watched movie of all time, according to the people I ask.
Yeah. So, anyways, you probably haven't actually seen We Bought a Zoo unless you actually remember what's in it.
And then when you show it to people,
yeah, they're always like, "This is the best movie I've ever seen."
Yeah, I showed it. Chris is like, "Yeah, I think I've seen it a few times." I'm like, right. And then I showed it to her, and it just blew her mind. She
And
was
then
like,
they're
"Oh."
always like, I wonder what I was thinking of. I was thinking of some other zoo movie, I guess.
Maybe it has
Anyways,
bad association. There's
I
nothing they
think it
can
was
do about that.
I think it was because the marketing seemed lackluster, and so everyone just was like, "Yeah, I saw it because of the marketing."
Right.
Anyways, watch We Bought a Zoo. First, watch it just because it's a great movie, and then go back and watch it with the sound off, and keep track of how quickly Cameron Crowe moves through each scene. I
You've
mean,
done this?
they what?
You've done this?
Oh, dude, I do this. So when I fly on airplanes, I don't bring headsets because I always want to find like a movie that I want to watch, and I'm going to watch it without audio.
No
Because
way.
it's so great to see like good movies without audio. You can still completely get what's going on.
Oh, I
Crappy
mean, you're
movies,
such a nerd for that, but that is also kind of genius. Like, that's how,
yeah.
yeah, that's a great thing to be aware of.
And then I counted. I watched the timer, and it's like the We Bought a Zoo. The first 30 minutes feels like 5 minutes because they just blast through scenes, but they feel so full. So it's like the first scene I think is like 30 seconds, then it goes to 45 seconds, then it goes back down to 35 seconds, then it goes to 90 seconds. And it's like they just blast through it, and each scene has a specific moment, right? You figure out that, okay, he's really successful at writing. You feel that the kid's having a hard time with school. Oh, their mom died. Oh, he's kind of having a midlife crisis. And it just keeps going. All these great exposition moments happen, but they happen in their own individual isolated scene, and it just
Mm,
moves.
huh.
That's a great example. And even like, I recently watched Kingdom of Heaven with the same thing. And Kingdom of Heaven's a slower movie. And yeah, there were some scenes where it's like, they clocked into like 2 minutes, but still only one thing of exposition happened in that 2 minutes. It was more, slow pans and stuff establishing the environment. But then
Mm.
once you get into it, you've got this big, massive, epic movie, and you're still having scenes that are 30 seconds, 40 seconds, 60 seconds, just moving through, the progression of it.
I have never
So
seen The Kingdom of Heaven.
watch the director's cut.
Oh, really?
Oh man, that's one. It's kind of like Abyss. I think Abyss by James Cameron is a
Yeah.
phenomenal movie. But you watch the original cut, and they took out basically the whole heart of it. Versus the director's cut is like, wow, this is phenomenal. Kingdom of Heaven is even more so that. I actually grew up having only watched the non-director's cut, and I just remember I was thinking like, wow, this is like cool, but there's nothing to it. There's no substance. And then you watch the director's cut, and there's like whole new characters, whole new plot lines, things that are like, oh, no wonder why they were acting that way. Oh my gosh, that makes so much, and it adds so much heart to it. I mean, I think it was like an hour. It's like an hour and 10-minute difference between the director's cut and the
Really? So
theatrical
it's
release.
huge,
That's
director's
huge.
cut.
But it's also kind of like, well, Ridley, like, why'd you go forward with a movie that you knew, the producers are gonna friggin' pee their pants about the length of it? It's like, but anyways, that's besides the point.
Anyway,
But yeah, so watch those movies with the sound off, and it's like it's amazing to see that pacing. And I learned a lot through that. And like I said, our first movie suffered greatly from that. Our second movie, we got better at it. And it's like our second movie, we kind of did opposite. Beginning flowed really well, ending slowed down, right? Versus our first movie, beginning was slow, ending was great. And so cool. Then our third movie, I think we did a better balance on it, and
so what do we learn? What do we got from this? Um, One, I would be happy to see more movies from the Critical Drinker.
yeah,
Like,
yeah. It's like
uh,
keep
he's
going.
still got a fan in me, and I'm always going to be interested. At least as of right now, I still feel like I'm still interested in seeing movies.
Yeah.
I have to pick up one of his books. I know he's published quite a few books, so I have to pick up one of his books and give that a read. Um, but yeah, I would like to see another movie. The final judgment on this one, I think it suffered from. I think the acting suffered from lack of direction.
Yeah, I think it all comes down to the director, and that doesn't mean I don't know if he's bad director or good director, right? I went back and watched some of his short films after I saw that he had done the Critical Drinker production, and I feel like some of those elements that were in Rogue Elements were also present in his short films, and so I think it is a bit of a style thing, or maybe an unconscious style, and so I think there's just some learning progress there. Again, it's like I saw it in a lot of the comments. People were like, "Oh, give them a bigger budget and they can do better." And it's like, well, money doesn't solve it. So it
Yeah,
has to be do you internalize it? Do you see what you need to change, or is it, a different person to do it? And different directors fit different styles, right?
yeah,
It's like I've known people who are great at, romance movies, and it's like then they do an action movie and it just sucks, right? But some directors are great at multifaceted things. Like Spielberg did, all kinds of variants of productions, and they're, phenomenal. It's like you've got Jurassic Park, which is an action movie done at the same time that Schindler's List, which is a, extremely tragic biopic.
yeah.
You can have all kinds of, but yeah, it's just kind of observing like what are you good at, where your skills are, and what are those things that need to be altered to make sure the pacing of the movie continues forward.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like keep trying it. And then now I do want to comment a little bit on what did you think about the budget? So you learned it was about 400,000 that they put into it.
Yeah,
I
I mean,
personally was shocked. I was kind of thinking like, hey, around 100 or under 100, I could see that. Um, I personally was shocked because it's like we did our World War II movie for 230,000, and it's a full
I wouldn't use us as a good measuring stick.
that's
I
true.
mean, can you see my background? This isn't this isn't a new build I'm in the middle of. Like, oh, I have enough money for a really nice reno.
Yeah, well, actually, I'm glad you said that. So, what my thought was is though I was surprised at the 400,000 um, price tag on it. In the end, it's like um, you never know where the money goes, right? And it's like if they all walked away making some money off of it, awesome, right? Because we've notoriously had the problems that we've done productions really inexpensive, but we also don't make any money off of it.
Yeah.
So it's like that's the difference of could it have been done for less? Yes, but
Yeah.
did everyone get paid well? Cool, that's
Yeah.
fine.
You can do things for less if you're willing to live less.
Hmm.
And you have to always remember that cuz yeah, we've done movies for really cheap, but we live really cheap. And a lot of people say, "Oh, I live cheap." You haven't lived cheap. I mean, living cheap is a nicer way of saying we've lived in abject poverty, and have and have against their will committed our loved ones to go through it with us.
Our
And
poor.
maybe that was irresponsible. I don't know, but we did it, and we were able to make some movies. No, 400,000 didn't really shock me.
Okay.
Feels like, an indie film nowadays.
Yeah.
Um, you can always do them cheaper, I guess.
Yeah. The
Um,
biggest thing I would say is, getting more budget isn't going to magically address those issues that at least we felt like there were.
that's
And
right.
so it's important to kind of commit those to, and also for, the aspiring filmmakers out there, because really that's kind of the takeaway is, money doesn't solve the problem. Money just allows you to have more of what you already have. So if your productions suck on low budgets with bad acting and bad locations,
You will continue. You have, yeah. You
yeah,
have very big bad acting and very big. Yeah. Yeah, it
yeah,
just won't be very good. Yeah, no, that's true. And for anybody who's interested, if you feel like we're being unfair here, feel free to find our videos online and tear us
and
a new
critique
one.
them.
You won't be doing anything we haven't done to ourselves. But
Yep. Yeah.
it's always exciting and fun to see people striking out into the abyss, trying to make their own movies. It's a huge undertaking. It's easy to critique something. It's hard to do it. So props to them for doing it. Keep doing it. I hope I see more movies by them. And I'm sure they are learning just like we've learned from our shortcomings.
Yep. Well said, man. Well, cool. Thanks for walking through that with me.
Yeah, that was nice. We should talk
Yeah.
again about stuff like this.
Yeah. So let's talk about trailers by this Spirit trailer.
I could sit down and talk trailers all day.
Yeah, trailers or commercials. Crappy.
Yeah,
I mean, unfortunately, like we haven't had a lot of really good commercials for a long time. None like the remember the Dodge?
I saw a commercial recently
Yeah.
that I told my wife, man, that is such a good commercial. They
What
did
was it?
such a great job. I'm
Did
trying
you
to remember
remember the Dodge Super Bowl commercial
how
with
to go.
oh man, it's got that like famous radio host guy, and he's like, and on the seventh day or on the eighth day, God created the farmer.
Oh, jeez, such a
Yeah,
good ad.
I was like, oh man,
Or the
dude.
Lexus Matrix ad.
Oh no, it wasn't Lexus. It was oh gosh, who was it? It was Infinity or
Infinity. Oh,
Kia? I think it was Kia,
yeah,
wasn't
I'll
it?
tell you, that was such a good ad.
Yeah, the or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, there's been some great ones, but well, that's for another time.
Anyways, get up there and keep making productions and make mistakes. Because
That's right.
honestly, failure is the best path to greatness.